Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, which is on teacher assessed grades and the process around that for this summer 2021. My name's Jenny Craig. I'm Deputy Principal here at the college, and I'll be joined by my colleague Helen Brown, who is Head of Study Programmes and has overall responsibility for GCSE English and Maths. We really hope that this webinar will give you all the information that you need about how we're approaching the teacher assessed grade, often called TAG process. As we go through, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop those in the question and answer box, and we'll come to those at the end. The webinar is being recorded as well and will be available on the website. And so if at any time after this you want to go back to the webinar and back to the recording, then you'll be able to do so. Okay, so if we can kick off with the slideshow, please. Great, thank you. So in terms of our plan for this update and the focus, so that's the next slide, please. We're aiming to update you on our approach to awarding teacher assessed grades and very much making sure that we are in alliance with the Ofqual guidance at all times, and as I say, give you the chance to ask any questions at all that you might have about this process. Next slide, please. Throughout this whole process, we have got some overriding principles that we want to stick to at all times, and I just want to go through those with you. So at all times, we will follow JCQ guidance. So JCQ is the Joint Council for Qualifications, and they are the body that set all of the guidance and all of the rules and regulations around qualifications generally, but specifically around the teacher assessed grade process. One of our key and most important overriding principles is that we will support all students to ensure that no individuals or particular groups are disadvantaged by this assessment process. We completely understand and appreciate the levels of anxiety that students and yourselves will be feeling around the uncertainty about the assessment process. So we want to make sure that we'll ensure that fair and transparent approach to the assessment methods that we're using, as well as the information and the evidence that we'll be using to assess current performance to inform those assessment decisions. And this webinar is a key part of that for us. We will, throughout the process, maintain our rigorous and robust approach so that we ensure the legitimacy of the qualification decisions as a validation of students' knowledge, skills and understanding. And that's really important because not only do we have obviously a need to do that for JCQ and the awarding organisations, but it's also really important that students feel confident that the grades that they receive this year are absolutely as valid as GCSE grades that students receive in any other traditional exam year. Next slide, please. You may already have seen this infographic. It's quite a handy infographic that Ofqual have produced, which gives students and parents an overview really of how the GCSEs will be awarded this summer. And I'll just go through a little bit of that, but obviously I'll go through more detail in a minute. So very much graded by teacher judgment, so that teacher assessed grades, and no algorithm in sight this year, which I know all of us are very pleased about. And it's really important that school and college assessments, so all of those assessments and the tests and mock exams, etc., that students take part in continue. But students will only be assessed on what they've been taught. Now that's slightly different for us compared to schools for our GCSEs, because they are resit GCSEs. So students have already studied, in the vast majority of cases, the whole GCSE syllabus. So actually that's much easier for us because we know that students have been taught all of the subject material. Teachers will have conversations with students about the evidence that's being used to grade them, and we'll go through that with you tonight, which is important. In terms of results days, the results for GCSEs will be on the 12th of August. They're brought forward, and I'll go through with you, or Helen will go through with you, the appeals process at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So we talk a lot about teacher assessed grade, these tags. So what actually are they? So I know there's a little bit of writing on this slide, so I'll go through this with you. So a teacher assessed grade is very much a formal judgment of learner attainment against the requirements of a given assessment. So in terms of the subject material and the learning objectives that an exam might test, if you like, or examine, then the teacher assessed grade is exactly doing the same job, but it's offered when it's impossible for a learner to complete that assessment. So in this case, learners are unable to take those GCSE exams. Ofqual are really clear, and JCQ, that the teacher assessed grades should be based on as much teaching, learning and assessment activity as possible, and all of you will know that we're continuing with that currently. They're only to be offered where learners can't complete those exams because they've been cancelled, but they must represent a holistic view of learner attainment. So it's not just about one particular piece of evidence, it's about getting a holistic view of all of the evidence about the level at which a learner is working. We need to make sure we have the substantial evidence about that learner attainment, and we need to make sure that we are complying with the awarding organisation requirements. We must make sure that we take into account any approved access arrangements, and any reasonable adjustments will be put in place, absolutely. And we have a process for making sure that we are aware, if we're not already, of any approved access arrangements. Another important thing to say is that teacher assessed grades aren't just assigned by your students' teachers. They're reached following a very rigorous internal quality assurance process, because we absolutely need to make sure that there is consistency and standardisation throughout all of our GCSE English and Maths groups. And JCQ have issued very clear guidance that it should be no easier or more difficult for a student to achieve a grade this year based on their performance than in previous years where exams have taken place. Next slide, please. So in terms of what a tag or a teacher assessed grade should not, it shouldn't be offered in the absence of teaching, learning and assessment activity. So we absolutely need to make sure that all of the students have studied the content that they're going to be assessed on. And this is slightly different to last year. So many of you will be aware that we had centre assessed grades last year, or CAGs, and very much they represented a centre's view of how learners would have performed if GCSE and other exams had taken place. That's not the case this year, so we can't give a view on how we think learners would perform if the GCSE exams still took place. And it also means that we shouldn't be using the tag process to give a view of how a learner has the potential to perform or might perform in the future. This is very much about providing our teacher assessed grades based on evidence of how students are performing and have performed over the course of this year. To make sure that the teacher assessed grades are accurate and valid, we, as I say, need to continue with teaching and learning as far and as long as possible, so we're doing that. And we're making sure that we assess learners against the whole purpose of the qualification and the achievement criteria. So that's about making sure we cover all of the content for the qualification, and we're assessing students against key criteria there. I'm now going to hand over to Helen, who will be talking a little bit more about the evidence that we will use for your students' teacher assessed grades and the timetable.
Good evening, and thank you again for joining us. So the sources of evidence, this is really important because this is the information that will provide us with the evidence to be able to create the teacher assessed grade. So for any students that sat the autumn exams, so if they sat the GCSE English or Maths in November and they weren't successful on that occasion, we will have those marks from those papers that they've sat. So for any of those students, that will inform part of the teacher assessed grade. For any students that didn't, and for the others, then the evidence will include the December internal assessment. So all of our students would have hopefully have sat and have been very much encouraged to have completed their December internal assessments. So the results from that will go towards the teacher assessed grade. We then did second internal assessments, which took place in February, and they will go towards the teacher assessed grade. And the most important, because this is the end of the period of study, so it's where the students will be able to demonstrate the full amount of progress that they've made, that will be the May mock assessments. So they are taking place from the week beginning the 10th of May in college. We can also use other sources of evidence. So, for example, students' work that they've completed during their lesson time, so their classwork, we can use that to help inform the teacher assessed grade, and also any of the out of class learning, so the homework and assessments that students have been working on in their own time. Informal assessment evidence can also be included. So, for example, any specialist teachers or any other educational professionals, so SENCOs, for example, who have worked with the learner, where appropriate, we can also include that in our evidence for the teacher assessed grades. Now, at the beginning of the year, we were planning for, hopefully we'll have exams, but just in case we don't, then right from the beginning, we've also been very aware of collecting the evidence. So we have strong evidence, and the records of that evidence will be kept, and it will determine the overall assessment grade, and we'll retain those for audit purposes. So in case the awarding organisations have any follow-up queries, or if there are any appeals, then we will have all of that evidence in place. Next slide, please. So these are the key dates. So I'd just like to run through these with you so you can appreciate and understand what's happening and when. So back in March, we started our collection of evidence and review, and with that, the teachers all sat down with the students. They had a one-to-one meeting with them so that they could be aware of the evidence that we had in place, any gaps that we had identified where the students needed to focus their revision, and then they also had in their subject review targets. So they had the targets that they need to work towards, and that fed into an action plan that was completed alongside with their course leader. So once we'd completed that, we went to the progress review week, which took place just before we went on the Easter break. So this is where the course leader for each of the students' vocational qualifications sat down with the students, and they did a full review of their progress and of the evidence that had been gathered to date, and agreed an overall action plan ready to put into place for after the Easter holiday, so during this term. And that's an action plan that will support the students all the way up to the summer assessment process. So as I mentioned on the last slide, on the 10th of May, this is when we've scheduled the start of our mock assessments. So if your son or daughter is taking a GCSE in English, then there will be 2 papers, exactly the same as there would be in exams. So we'll be doing mock assessments of paper 1 and also paper 2, and they will take place in college. For those that might be doing GCSE maths, then we have 3 papers. So 2 of those are non-calculator and 1 is a calculator. And again, these will take place in college at their normal lesson times in their normal classrooms. So we're not sitting them under exam conditions, and there won't be sort of constraints with regards to normal exam times. So the 28th of May, that's definitely a date to remember, because that's the very last date that students will be able to submit any evidence. So after this date, any work that the students will do won't be able to be taken into consideration for those teacher assessed grades. So by the 4th of June, teachers will have spent the whole of their May half-term marking. We'll go through a moderation process, and then the teachers will compile the initial teacher assessed grades, and then they'll be subject for internal quality assurance. So following that, the week after, that's where the internal quality assurance of those grades will be started, and that's carried out by the faculty management and it's rigorous, it's very robust, there's discussions and reviews, and the evidence is also looked at to make sure that those teacher assessed grades are fair and accurate. Following that, we go to the 11th of June, and that's where our head of centre will sign off. So it's that strategic review at looking at their entire process and the teacher assessed grades, and then the grades will be uploaded and sent off to the awarding organisation. So that's the end of our college teacher assessed grade process, and it hands over to the awarding organisation from the 21st of June, and then that's where they are able to review the teacher assessed grade profile. There'll also be sampling centres and also the evidence that has gone towards those teacher assessed grades. And then at the end of that process, you'll get the grades. So 12th of August is when the GCSE results will be published. Can I have the next slide, please? So once you have your the GCSE grades, it may be that you would like to appeal the grade, and there isn't a process that's already been confirmed in line with the JCQ guidance. So if you believe when you get your result that an error has been made, then you do have the right to appeal. And there are two different stages that you can follow for the appeals process. So the first stage is to appeal with your centre. So that's us, so with the Abingdon Witney College. So if you think that you've been issued with the correct if you think you have been issued with the correct grade, you can appeal to college, and we will review two things. So whether we've made an administrative error, so if we submitted an incorrect grade, or if we've used an incorrect assessment mark when determining your grade, we will check that. And if we did not apply procedure correctly, so for example, if we didn't follow the centre policy, if we didn't undertake the internal quality assurance, if we didn't take into account of the access arrangements, or any other mitigating circumstances, so for example, if there was an illness, then that's the first stage, and we will review that. Upon the result of that process, the second stage is where you can appeal to the exam board. So if you still don't think that the correct grade has been provided, then you can ask for us to appeal to the exam board, and the exam board will then review whether we have made an unreasonable exercise of the academic judgment. So have we made a mistake? And it will be determined whether the grade or from that evidence is correct or not. They will also have a look at us as a college to see again whether we did or we didn't apply the procedure correctly, and the exam board will make an administrative, if the exam board has made an administrative error, that will then be identified. But please be aware that potentially that the grade can be changed during this process, and the grade potentially can stay the same, or it might go up, but it might also go down. Can I have the next slide, please? So just a final slide on our quality assurance. So at each part of the process, it's approached with integrity and with the resolution to make the process robust and fair. We're experienced from the process last year, and we're very well organised and prepared for the process this year. Throughout the process, the faculty managers will meet with staff, and we will ask them to reflect on their own decisions. And this is based on trusted evidence that is available to all members of staff as part of that quality assurance process. And then the final teacher assessed grades will be approved following the head of faculty, the quality lead, the curriculum manager led one-to-one meetings with each of the English and Maths teaching staff. So that's our quality assurance. If we can have the next slide, please. So this is an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have with regard to the information we've just provided for you and about the teacher assessed grade process.
Thank you, Helen and Jenny. We have a few questions that have come in. The first question is, does my son have to come to college to sit the assessments?
Oh, that's a really good question. So when those assessments, the mock assessment starts from the 10th of May, they are in college. So this will be the first time that we've been able to collect assessment work from the students in the classroom, taken in real time, in a really relaxed atmosphere. So please encourage and ensure, we would really appreciate your support to ensure that they come to college for those mock assessments, and they take them in college in their normal lesson times in their normal classrooms. So thank you.
And we have another one. I'm usually in a smaller room for exams. Will this still happen?
So if it's with regard to an access arrangement, so if access arrangement has been applied for and the student is eligible for access arrangements, depending on those needs, we will meet those needs. So if a student is normally in a small room privately, but they have a reader or they have a scribe, then we will still be able to provide those access arrangements. For students that don't have access arrangements, they don't need to be worried or anxious or concerned about going into an unusual environment or sitting in a very large sports hall. We're not conducting the assessment in an exam style in any way, shape or form at all. So all of the classrooms are going to be small classrooms anyway, because we're using our normal learning environments. But as I say, for any of those students that are eligible for access arrangements, then we will be able to meet those needs.
Thank you. Another question. Will I get...
Sorry, I only heard the will I. Sorry, Rachel, could you just repeat that question?
Yes, sorry. It's will I get extra time?
Okay, so because we're not sitting the mock assessments as an exam, we're not being strict about the amount of time. So the shortest amount of time a normal GCSE examination paper will be is an hour and a half, and the longest length of a paper is an hour and 45 minutes. So the way that we've approached the assessments is that during the first week, so if we look at English, for example, the week beginning the 10th of May, the students have 2 lessons, and each of those lessons are an hour and a half each. So students will have 3 hours in total to complete their paper 1. So students will have far more than the normal additional extra 20 minutes or 30 minutes that they have if they do have that extra time. So there's plenty of opportunity for students to be able to complete the paper with extra time. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
OK, then we've got a number of additional questions that have come in this evening. So just taking it from the top here, from the Q&A that you can still add to this evening. The first one here is, what % is assessment based and what percentage is based on any coursework?
So it's not really being done on a percentage base. We're looking at the evidence that we have for each student based on those, whether they sat the November exam or whether they were using the December assessment or the February assessment and the mock assessment. So we're not splitting it in a percentage. The teachers know their students really, really well. They've been working with them over the last academic year. They meet with them regularly, they create targets, they review those targets, so the teachers know their students really well. I would say that for me, it's really, really important those students are coming into college and they sit those mock assessments, because as I said previously, that's demonstrating, what the students are able to achieve at the end of a whole programme of study. And at the moment, we're in a 3-week period of really intense revision. And that's quite often where students gain a bit more confidence. It's also the period of time where they can pick up a few other skills, or through repetition, they remember those skills. So normally in an exam year, after the revision period, they go into their exam and they can gain those extra few marks that can really make the difference between pushing them over that grade 3 boundary up to a grade 4 boundary, for example. So we're not putting a percentage split on each of the assessments, but all of the evidence that we're using will be looked at and will go towards the teacher assessed grade.
And I think, Jenny, do you want to say something on this one as well?
Yes, thank you, Mark. So I just wanted to say that obviously, unlike sort of vocational qualifications where there is formal coursework, of course, with GCSE English and Maths, these qualifications that we're running, there is no formal coursework. And so everything is usually based on the exam. So what that means is that all the evidence that we're collating is sort of all they're all the assessments that students have taken all the way through this year. So including the December assessment, the February assessment, and the May assessment, which is there to come. So there's no coursework as such, but as Helen quite rightly said, what we're doing is looking at the students' performance across all of those assessments. And obviously the assessments that are closest to the end of the course will be the ones that should give us a better view of the students' attainment, but we will absolutely look at all of the evidence across all of the course that they've studied this year.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. Anything else from yourself on that one there, Helen?
No, I'm quite happy with that, unless parents have any other questions in relation to it.
Okay, so another question for you this evening then. How are predictions going to work, if at all, this year for applying to move on to further training or employment?
So I would say that they work in the same way as they would do normally. So it's really important to us. We're not allowed to tell the students or you the teacher assessed grades that we are submitting to the awarding organisation. So JCQ and Ofqual have been really clear about that. But it's really important to us that we're having discussions with students, which is exactly what took place during Progress Review Week, about what the evidence that we've already gathered is telling us about a student. So a student should be really clear by now on where they're sitting in terms of the evidence that we've already accumulated, and an action plan for them in terms of achieving the grade that they want to achieve. So if they need an estimated grade, then we can provide that in the normal way. But we're not allowed to tell students the actual teacher assessed grade that we're submitting.
Okay, thank you. So a general question here, is it possible to have the slides or a version of them sent out, and where can people find this event again after today?
That's a really good question. Yes, we'll make sure that the whole webinar, including the slides, are accessible on our website, and we can make sure that we send a link out to all of the GCSE English and Maths parents.
Okay, thank you. So quite a different one here then. My daughter goes to Common Lees. She's doing English and Maths, and she needs to be able to revise confidently and is looking for actual dates and times to work to. We don't have this information yet. Can we please have this information? What's your best advice there?
So I'm going to hand that over to Helen, who's planning with her team the exact dates that all of the students will sit their mock exams for.
Thank you. So that's a very good question, because there is a slight difference for the students at Common Lees, because some of them will be on industry placements and completing some of their work experiences, and also because of their timetabling. What we have agreed with the vocational programme is that the GCSE English and the Maths assessments students will have exactly the same amount of time, but they won't necessarily be sitting them at the same time as their normal planned lesson, because their lessons are online, and potentially it means that students won't be able to access the campus to be able to sit those assessments at those times. So therefore we have an agreement with their vocational team that they can sit those assessments still beginning the 10th of May up until the 28th of May, but at different times. So at the moment I can't confirm what they are, but once we do have those confirmed times from the curriculum manager, then we can email parents and confirm exactly on which days and at what time. But please plan for those assessments still to take place from the 10th of May.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Another one. My son is studying from home due to mental health issues. Does he need to attend the mock assessments face to face, or can they be done online?
So ideally, we would like students to come to college and to come into the classroom and to take the assessments with their teacher in a relaxed environment. We are aware that this has been a very unprecedented year, and therefore if there are any students on an individual basis that we need to consider, then we most definitely will. We don't want students to be disadvantaged in any way, so if you feel that it's in the best interest, we're having a provision whereby a student in isolated cases can sit their assessments but still online, so it will still have somebody who will be a member of the English and Maths team that will be observing them doing their assessment live online. So we will have set days and times for when those assessments will be, once we know how many students, or if we have any students that are eligible, and we can do that for.
Okay, I think to come in there, Jenny.
Yeah.
I was just going to reiterate some JCQ guidance, actually, in that we need to, when we submit our teacher assessed grades, we need to confirm to the awarding organisation that we are confident and have evidence that students, that the work is the student's own work. And obviously that's very easy for us to do when they're with us in the classroom. So we just need to make provision that we can confidently give that assurance to the awarding organisation if in those isolated cases students do sit that assessment online at home. So as Helen said, there will be that provision for the sort of remote invigilation, if you like.
Okay, thank you both. This may relate to the answer you've just been giving there. If my son can't attend a mock assessment, what is the backup plan?
So I think it depends why the student can't attend the mock assessment. If it's that that particular date and time just don't work for some unavoidable reason, and again, I think I would echo what Helen said in terms of we would really welcome your support in making sure that students can attend those dates and times, but we do have a little leeway, so we will make provision if students have missed one of those classes to make sure that they can complete, but it will still need to be within that window, and we'll obviously need to make sure that we can make it work. So I would say don't panic, but please do everything that you can to attend the scheduled classes so that you can complete those mock assessments within the time.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Can a child have a review meeting with a teacher to check they're on target between now and the end of the assessment?
Helen, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So most definitely, our teaching staff are really approachable. The students can either ask them face to face, they can send them a message on Teams, they could send them an email. If the student would like to have a review meeting, if they would like to review their progress in terms of the action plan that was communicated before Easter, then our teachers would be delighted, because they go out of their way to really help and support to make sure that the students really have the best opportunity of being successful. So yes, please just get them to ask their teachers.
Okay, thank you. How do we know if access arrangements are in place?
So right from the beginning of the academic year, for some students, we're aware immediately of their access arrangements. Students are asked in September when they join us about whether they require access arrangements. We've already gone through 2 lots of internal assessments, so those December assessments and the February assessments. So if we hadn't had notification of access arrangements for the December assessments, for example, then we picked up on it at that point. If for any reason any students that didn't complete those December assessments on time, and therefore they then sat the February assessments, it would have been picked up then. In all of their lessons previously and also recently, students have been advised to inform us in advance if they believe or they think they are entitled to access arrangements. And there's an MS form, and it's a really quick and easy form for the students to fill out, and then that goes centrally, and we then organise all of those students, and we have many students in our college that have different types of access arrangements that have been approved. So if you would like to check, then you could send an email in either to the English or the maths teacher, or to Rachel, who Rachel Kershaw sends out the main communications to all parents. So just let us know your student's name and we can then check and confirm with you if you'd like to know in advance, just for your peace of mind.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Slightly different one now. Where and how will we be able to get the results?
Shall I take that one, Helen?
Yeah, if you want to take that one. I know the date, but I'm not too sure how we're communicating them this year.
So it's very likely that the communication of results will be the same as we had last year. So last year we had the results here on the morning of GCSE results day, and students can come into college and collect their results. They need to remember to bring some ID. If they don't come and collect their results, usually by lunchtime, then we pop them in the post for them. So if you'd like your results first thing on the 12th, then please come into college either to the Abingdon campus or the Witney campus. So if you're a Common Lease student, your results will be available at the Witney campus, which is where our official centre is for exams. Otherwise, we'll post them out to you if we haven't seen you by about lunchtime or 2 o'clock. But we will confirm the exact details with you nearer the time.
Okay, we have 2 questions remaining. So for those of you watching this evening, now's your last chance to pop any additional ones into the Q&A. We've got 2 left here for you this evening. Firstly, can my son's private tutor submit work he's been doing at home to provide evidence of his maths level?
So yes, they can. We would need to have a conversation with the private tutor to understand under which conditions that work has been carried out, and obviously we'll need to look at how that sits with the work that the student has carried out with us as well in college, but that can form part of the evidence, but it won't be the only evidence that we rely upon, but absolutely it can form part of the evidence.
Okay, and finally for now then, quite a specific question. For English, is paper 1 in the week of the 10th and paper 2 in the week of the 17th?
I'm going to hand over to Helen on that one.
Yes, we're doing it in that completely logical order. So the week beginning the 10th of May will be the GCSE English paper 1, and then the week beginning the 17th of May it will be the GCSE English paper number 2. Good question, and thank you for checking.
Okay, so at the moment that's all the questions we've been asked. So if anyone's got any last questions to pop in the QA box, now's your chance.
Say thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to attend this webinar. It's really important to us that we work in partnership with parents to make sure that your sons and daughters are as successful as they have the potential to be, and please be reassured that we are doing everything we can, and we'll continue to do everything that we can to make sure that the students feel supported, feel and are clear about the process that's taking place, so have a good understanding. And if at any time you're not sure and you'd like a bit more information, you'd just like to touch base, or any time that the students aren't quite sure, they just need to reach out, talk to their teacher, or send an email to someone here at the college. So probably the best person is Rachel, who's on the call with us today, and her details are rachel.kershaw@abingdon-witney.ac.uk, and she will be able to pass any inquiry on to the relevant person. But we're all here to support the students, so if there's anything that you need to know that we haven't covered today, then please just ask.
Okay, we have no further questions from the group, so if there are any sort of closing things you'd like to say this evening.
I'd just like to say again, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it useful. If there's anything you want to go back on, feel free to re-watch the webinar when it's available on the website. But thank you from both Helen and myself. Thank you very much.